Okay, so I thought I'd use the same two die sets as I used for my cards last week, but to show you a slightly different way to use them again. Obviously, what I wanted to go for with this card initially sort of came to me in a brainwave. I can't remember if it was driving or I was waiting for the kids outside the school or something, but I thought using these heart shapes they'd be ideal to make balloons from. So I sat down and that's what I had in mind when I made this card, but I think this turned out to be more looking like a flower than it did a balloon. But I put that idea in your head there so you sort of know where I was going with it. So I may have a little play and just a little rearrange perhaps and see what we can come up with. But it's just a really nice way to use all the different hearts. Use all the different sentiments, especially if you can't make up your mind as to which one of them to use. And as I say, it's just another way to use these sets. Now the basis of the card is actually quite straightforward, and it's something that I've covered last week and other design team members. So the base of the card, all I've done, you can choose your background. I'm quite liking going with the same colour for the frame and for the main of the card at the moment, and the way to differentiate that is to actually raise up the middle section onto 3D foam. Now I've used a nesting die set which is no longer in stock of Lisa's, but you would have all had nesting die sets, so you can take your pick as to what you want to use in your background, whether it be plain textured cardstock or even any of your patterned papers. You can say take your pick, and that's what would form the basis of the background of your card for you. Then we have gone in and cut the birthday word from the Frame Sentiments collection, and I found this set is so useful. I keep reaching for this time and again. I really must get myself the other set because I think it's got the happy in there as well, so then you'd have like happy birthday. But as you know, I do like to mix and match my sentiments, so just using the birthday and then finding a way to sort of embellish that word with a happy or congratulations like I've used here, then that's really right up my street. So I've cut happy, no I haven't, I've cut the birthday out and matte and laid that on to a contrasting colour in the background there. So this card is actually going to be a lot bolder in colour than this one is, but I think that sits really nicely on the card there. So that is the basis of your card. Now what I will do, last week I just used the die cuts of this set and I didn't do any stamping. So that's the die, but this week I will actually stamp these hearts out for you, and I will actually emboss them too. So twofold, show you that the stamps are a beautiful quality and they really do stamp really nice. But also I'll bring in some of Lisa's super fine sparkle embossing powder as well. And this just shows that even with a fine detail on this particular type of stamp, that Lisa Horton's embossing powders are really fabulous to use. And there is a good few in the collection now. There's a set of 4 colours, plus there's the black, the gold and the silver to use. Now today I'll be using my stamping platform because I want to stamp over a couple of times, and it's actually quite a big stamp plate. But I actually be using a distress oxide to stamp. Now the main reason for this initially is because my embossing ink, which is the clear embossing ink, which is probably more like a glue actually, but you use it like an ink pad, is actually run out and it's probably going dry, and I haven't reordered myself another one yet. But if you stamp with the distress oxide in particular, because of the nature of the ink in the oxides, it actually stays wet for a long time. So this actually works as would a pigment ink. which you would normally emboss on, because the pigment ink, once it goes onto the paper, it stays wet long enough for you to tip the embossing powder on and for it to adhere. So the distress oxides work in pretty much the same way, even though these are a hybrid. These are a cross between like a pigment and a dye. So I'll actually be stamping with this today in pink. Now every time I stamp these hearts, it always seems to be in pink, and earlier on I did stamp in a different colour and it just didn't look right. So, but I think that is just me, that I just need to get my head around that these hearts can actually be a different colour other than pink. But the pink works so well and they come out so lovely. Now I'm stamping onto Lisa Horton's Super Smooth cardstock. And you can see that just in that one pass straight away that we've got a really lovely impression. But I shall go in a second time because I really want to make sure that my ink stays wet enough for me to put my embossing powder on. And we get a really nice even impression right across all the stamps. Now quite often I would stamp these onto a textured cardstock. So again, this is what makes the stamping platform in particular really useful to use, because you would definitely need to come in a couple of times to get all the detail even onto a textured cardstock. The hearts I'll be using later are on a textured cardstock, so you see how well that actually works. So I'm giving that a really good press down. You can see we've got a really lovely impression. So I'll take that off the stamping platform quite quickly, and that this is when I'll actually be coming in and cover the entire lot with the embossing powder. Now another advantage of using an ink, particularly that's the same colour as the embossing powder, it means that if for some reason the embossing powder, get my teeth in. If for some reason the embossing powder didn't stick to a particular part of the design, or it rubbed off, or it smudged or whatever, or it didn't emboss properly, the ink underneath, being the same colour, would actually sort of disguise that a little bit. Now if you bear with me, I've just got a tiny little hair that's just sitting on top of that. Now, there we are, so and I'm just using my tweezers just to remove that. There we go. Now, what I should have done and what I didn't do is to wipe this cardstock with an anti-static pad beforehand, but that's actually no issue. I know I haven't sort of handled the cardstock too much, so I knew that I wouldn't have too many fingerprints on there. But it would be really good to sort of get into that habit if you can. See, do as I say, not as I do. When you're on these lives, certain things like that always go out of your head. Okay, so now I've sprinkled the hearts with the embossing powder, and I will emboss this for you, and hopefully you'll see some of the twinkle that comes through. Now I can do this very gently. Now what I find is quite a helpful tip when you are embossing, just before you need to use your heat tool, just put it on for perhaps even only 30 seconds. Just let it get to heat before you actually come at your project with the tool. By just giving it that little extra bit of time to heat up, it means that it turns the powder on the paper a lot quicker. So it means you spend less time actually heating the paper, and therefore you're reducing the chance of your cardstock warping. The other way to prevent your cardstock from warping when you heat as well is to not put your heat gun too close to your project, or not too close to your cardstock. And as soon as you see one part of the embossing powder sort of turn, move on to the next section, because say any little amount of heat, however sort of resistant the cardstock or how good the cardstock is, you will always have a tiny little bit of distortion. So really we just want to sort of minimise that as much as we can. Now Lisa's cardstock is actually brilliant because it's a really good thickness. I think it's 280 GSM. It's super smooth, so it's perfect for stamping on, and it takes the embossing powders perfectly. Now I don't know if you can see this as I was going, but that has actually embossed all the way through now, and you can see you've got that really gorgeous soft pink colour. And because you're using the embossing powder on top of a coloured ink, the actual impression does fade a little bit. Not fade, it sort of lightens. The impression you would have noticed when I first stamped probably looked a lot darker to you on screen, but this has actually lightened up a little bit now, which gives a really lovely colour. And there is actually a sparkle there. You can see it in real life, but because of the artwork is so fine, you can't actually pick it up on camera. But that is now embossed, and what we would then do, of course, is run this through the die cutting machine. We'd line up our hearts. We have the two tiny cute little reference hearts at each side, and they can run that through the die cutting machine, and we'll end up with our set of die cut hearts. Let's just move that aside. Now you can see here, as I said, I've actually stamped onto textured cardstock, and I've also stamped onto a slightly coloured cardstock as well. So this actually goes in keeping with the cardstock that I'm using on my card base. Now I'll put this against a white background for you. I'll just pick some of these up and bring them closer to the camera, and I'm hoping, maybe not, you may be able to pick up just that little bit of sparkle that's sitting there in the background. And now this is a really good example that I stamped this with the picked raspberry, as I did just now for you, then embossed with the same embossing powder, the pink superfine sparkle, and it's gone a really pale pink onto this sort of lemony cardstock, which I think is actually really nice because we want to actually bunch these sentiments together. The fact that the wording is sort of just pared down a little bit, I think it just makes it a lot easier to start working with. Now, bringing my cardstock again, now this is where we can have some fun and actually start rearranging and just seeing what we can come up with. Now I'll see if I can perhaps try and create something a bit more balloon-like this time. I'll bring in this card for you, and I'll just show you initially how we sort of created the design that we came up on this first card. Now it's something that, say, everybody can really come up with and just have a play with. You may come up with different designs, or depending even on the shaped card that you're working on as well. I mean, you may decide to work on more of a C6 card, which is more of a rectangle dimensions. It's up to you, but these hearts are so forgiving in the way that you can arrange them, and all you do, I say, it's very simple really. It's something that everybody would be able to arrange. All you can do is just start building the shape. Now, because of the sentiment is actually in the centre of the heart, you don't want to hide what the heart is saying too much, so perhaps just be a little bit mindful with the message that is on the heart, because obviously we've got one that says miss you here. If you put this in too far, then you would only have the sort of, you'd see the miss, which it'd be nice to sort of keep the whole sentiment visible. Now actually you can see straight away how this shape is actually changing already from what I've done here. Now if I were to keep this to make this shape, I'd take these two side ones out and start moving these up this way, and you can see how now we are building perhaps a taller shape that's stacked up this way. Now what I quite like also is that it's coming off the page and off the side of the card a little bit, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to put this middle section onto 3D foam, because it gives the card a nice little bit of dimension, and I really like the fact that the card can then go off the side. Now I'll come back down to this shape again, because what I'm thinking perhaps in doing that, I can create another little shape over this way. Now I can just perhaps go with 2, which actually maybe if you put 2 together they could look like a butterfly also. So just let your imagination go when you're sort of playing with these. There is really no rules at all, I would say. So perhaps I can do that. Then we still have some hearts left over, and perhaps we can put some single ones sitting at the top. Or maybe we could perhaps do another 3. I think I might actually quite like that this way round. I could leave it at that. Now, the next part we need to sort of consider is how to actually anchor these flowers or balloons, whichever way you want to describe them. And you can notice on this card here that we've actually got a stalk running down behind the sentiment. Now to create that, all I've done is took one of my floral sets. I took the shabby florals because I know that they had the stalk in them. So we've got 2 stalk dies there, and it was only just those 2 dies that I've used to create the stalks in the accent colour in the blue there. Now if you don't have that particular set to get the stalks from, you may have other sets, in which case you can die cut this, or you may have die sets that have balloons and you have balloon strings in them. Or failing that, you could use a piece of string or a piece of ribbon, or you could just get yourself a piece of cardstock, obviously in the right colour, and just cut yourself really thin strips, either on with scissors or with your trimmer, and that would work also. You can just cut yourself really thin strips like this. Actually, they're probably a bit too thin, those ones. I wouldn't be able to put glue on them, but just create that, and then you created yourself a couple of flower stalks or balloon ribbons, whichever way. But so I'm going to go with the ones that I've managed to die cut, and I can actually slot those behind the flowers like that. Now let's see if we can get another one to work in that way. I'm actually really liking this way time round. So we can put those stalks in like so, and if we can perhaps fit another one in the top there. I mean, we could just leave it with the 2. I think actually that 3rd one does work higher up. Oh, the puppy's having a bark. She's really found her voice these past few weeks. Oh. Okay, so just rearrange that like so. Now I would suggest not sticking anything down until you're fully happy with the way you've arranged things. So that could be a sort of a really nice way, and then we could add our sentiment with 3D foam, which I forgot to put on actually. Let's get some scissors. And just by raising this sentiment up on 3D foam, it gives you a lot more scope as to what you can do underneath. I think it, and I really like the dimension that you can actually see through the sentiment and see through the word, which then means you can sort of see the stalk behind. And sometimes when you just lay things flat, it can all look a bit inconsistent, and I think you sort of lose why something might be there sort of in the background. So I think just by raising this up like so, you can see that the stalks are meant to be there in the background. Now I think what I would do, there we are, we can just sit that on top like that, and I really like those colours together actually. Now just while I have this one single heart sitting here, now when I was thinking about having a balloon, what you could do even, I have another one here, you could just add single hearts onto a stalk, or even arrange the hearts like now you can see that I'm playing, and if I'm not careful I'll end up dismantling what I've just done here just to create different shapes. But to say, have a load of these hearts stamped and just play with them. Now you could arrange a heart on a stalk or on a string like that, and that would be your ribbon. Now if we actually place that on a card, if you manage to cut lots of these, then I think that would work, and you can arrange them all different heights on the card. I think that's possibly what I was trying to think of initially. Or you can arrange them as flowers like so, or you can have a multiple hearts on one stalk arranged alternately like this. So bear with me, I'm just going to bring in a couple of hearts. They won't match in colour, but I have them sitting there. But you can arrange the hearts on the stalk like so, so you can have a different type of flower, sort of come heart stalk type thing like that. It's entirely up to you, have a play. As you can see, there's so many different ways, there's so I can sit here and faff about and play with that sort of all day long, but I won't, because that would end up looking quite boring. Now what I would do, because I have these two extra hearts that are part of the same set, and instead of keeping these stored away somewhere or even thrown, what I would possibly do is attach them on the insert, one on the inside of the card and possibly one even on the reverse like that. I think that would be really nice. I'll use this card because I haven't stuck those down. So it'd be nice if you had an insert and you can just put that on the inside of the card. I think that'd be really sweet. Okay, now on this initial card I've used some pearls to actually embellish. This time I think what I might do is use the faceted gems that Lisa has, and we could arrange a couple of those on the card also. Now I like ones that really sort of tone in to the card that you've made, so they don't stand out but they're subtly there. That's the way that I like that. So what I may do, once I actually go around and attach this card, you know, stick everything down, I think I might attach a couple of the gems like so. And I'm just trying to pick up some of the smaller ones here. There we are. That we can just dot around in the background as well. I think they're so pretty. There we are. I think that would work really well. They're like little water drops. It just adds that little bit of extra bling onto your card. So in the background. Oh, there we are. Now I'm going to be really careful because I haven't attached any of these down, but I think that that is a really lovely way to use the hearts, and very different to the way that I used them last week. And if I just bring in those cards that I used last week with exactly the same dies, you can tell that, well, you can see straight away it's entirely different feel, which again just shows and demonstrates just how versatile Lisa's products are. There's just so many different ways you can use them. Okay, actually I really enjoyed playing that, and I really like the way those colours came out today. I did have I couldn't make up my mind which colours to use, and the colour scheme I went for initially just wasn't working for me, so I changed it to this pink at the very last minute, and I think that's worked really nicely. That's worked really well. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll probably spend a bit of time just after I leave you here this afternoon. I'll get all that stuck down and I'll photograph it and put that in the group so you can get to see just how that looks all completely finished. Let me see. Oh, hi Sharon. Sharon's with us here now. Oh, and Natalia, how are you doing? Jean, you like the pink one, do you? I really like the way that's come out, and say the way the flowers have worked. It's worked so differently. But I think each time you sit down and create something different with these, you would actually come up with a different way of using them and a different way of arranging them. So I think that's what makes these sets really fun. There's so many different. I'll leave you for this afternoon. I hope you have lovely afternoon and a lovely week, and I shall hope to see you all again next week. Thanks everyone.